We are in chapter 12 of Proverbs, and there are three things specifically that I want to pull out of this chapter that spoke to me. But let me read through it first. There in verse 1, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. A good man obtains favor from the Lord, but the Lord condemns a crafty man. A man cannot be established through wickedness, but the righteous cannot be uprooted. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. The plans of the righteous are just, but the advice of the wicked is deceitful. The words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the speech of the upright rescues them. Wicked men are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stands firm. A man is praised according to his wisdom, but men with warped minds are despised. Better to be a nobody and yet have a servant than pretend to be somebody and have no food. A righteous man cares for the needs of his animal, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. He who works his land will have abundant food, but he who chases fantasies lacks judgment. I'm going to come back to verse 11 here in a minute. The wicked desire the plunder of evil men, but the root of the righteous flourishes. An evil man is trapped by his sinful talk, but a righteous man escapes trouble. From the fruit of his lips, a man is filled with good things, as surely as the work of his hands rewards him. The way of a fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice. We're seeing consistent themes over and over again throughout the last 11 days and today on day 12. Number 16, verse 16. The fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult. A truthful witness gives honest testimony, but a false witness tells lies. Verse 18, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. We're going to come back to verse 18. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only for a moment. There is deceit in the hearts of those who plot evil, but joy for those who promote peace. No harm befalls the righteous, but the wicked have their fill of trouble. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in men who are truthful. A prudent man keeps his knowledge to himself, but the heart of the fool blurts out folly. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in slave labor. An anxious heart weighs a man down, but kind words cheer him up. A righteous man is cautious in friendship, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. The lazy man does not roast his game, but the diligent man prizes his possessions. And here we go, last one. In the way of righteousness there is life. Along that path is immortality. This is God's word. And as we've been tracking through, I'm not sure how you've been doing this. Perhaps you've been watching the video and only focusing on the things that are standing out to me, which is fine. You certainly can do that. But I want to continue to encourage you to, even when we're done with the video, go back through it. Maybe something else stands out to you. The parts that I'm pulling out of each chapter are the ones that perhaps are most relevant to me and where I'm at. But the few things that stood out to me today is verse 11. That's the first one. He who works his land will have abundant food, but he who chases fantasies lacks judgment. And I looked up the word chase and have it here. What that means is frantic pursuit. Frantic pursuit. And a saying, I don't know who came up with it. It's perhaps an age-old proverb of some kind. But the saying, to bloom where you are planted, I think there's so much wisdom in that. The reality is God has given you land. Whether that is literal or figuratively, God has placed you where you're at. And so often what trips me up when I get consumed with what I don't have instead of focusing and stewarding or being faithful with what I do have. And that's what verse 11 is getting at. He who works his land will have abundant food. And I want to ask you, are you working the land that God has given you instead of being focused on the land in which you don't have? Are we focused and are we faithful with stewarding the place that God has called us to instead of this kind of pursuit, frantic pursuit of a land that we hope we might have one day? And I'm a dreamer. If you know me well, you know that I live in the future. And that's really good to some degree. But that is one of the things that can trip me up, is I can focus on the things that I don't have or the land in which I'm not in yet, and I can fixate my mind on that. I can run towards that, and sometimes I do that at the cost of being grateful for where I'm at today. I do that at the cost of stewarding the land in which I'm in today. Are you blooming where you have been planted? The second thing that stood out to me today was around the words that flow from our lips. And it says there in verse 18, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. The question there that I ask myself, are my words right now, do a word audit. Are they bringing hurtfulness or healing? Are your words hurting people or are your words healing people? When we read this and other places, the book of James comes to mind. Our words are meant to create life and beauty in others. Our words are meant to be a healing agent in the life of hurting people that are all around us. Are our words creating hurt or are they creating healing? And sometimes one of the things that can help our words create more healing is by speaking less. Sometimes we just need to talk less. Maybe we're using too much words. Maybe we just need to listen more. Or perhaps maybe you and I need to slow down. Maybe we want to jab out or quickly say different things. Maybe we need to just take some time to think about those words. Or maybe we need to be filled with more and more wisdom. And so when we do in fact speak, the words that are flowing from our mouth are not just kind of our words, but they're words that are flowing from the word of life, from God's word. That's one thing that I love how Proverbs is, what Proverbs is creating within me. I feel like God has given me more wisdom. I feel like my words over the past, few days have more wisdom. They have more life. They have more healing in them because they're a little bit more of God's word. And so ask yourself, even ask the person you live with, ask your roommate, ask your spouse, ask some of your colleagues, hey, over the last month or last week, tell me, are my words healing? Are my words building you up or are my words tearing you down? Ask some people to hold you accountable to that as believers, or those of you that are investigating who Jesus is. We should be known by being a people whose words are full of life and beauty and healing. That's the second thing. The third thing is all about who our friends are. And what really stood out to me, as you get to the very end there in verse 26, it says, a righteous man is cautious in friendship, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. And the principle there is, be careful who you hang out with. And I've already said it once before, but even as recent as last night, Kelly and I were talking about that, and we're just saying the reality is you become who you hang out with. You really do. And for you and I to be cautious in this, for you and I to take our time in this, the word cautious there means to investigate, it means to search out, it means to really think about who is it that we are going to spend the most amount of our time with. If you find yourself being very ungrateful or not satisfied at all with what God has given you, the chances are you're hanging out and spending time with people that are very similar. Who are you hanging out with? Have you taken the time to really search that out, to be cautious, to investigate that? That's the last part that stood out to me there in verse 26. Here's how I want to finish, though. I was reminded this past week of a verse in 1 Timothy 4:12. And it says this, and this is Paul speaking to Timothy. He says, don't let anyone look down on your age. Timothy was a little bit younger. He was a younger pastor. He was not a teenager, but he was a younger pastor. And Paul said, don't let anyone look down on your age. Instead, I want you to be an example for all the believers in these 5 ways. He said, I want you to be an example, lastly, in purity. Be pure. I want you to be an example. Put on a clinic of what it looks like to be an example in purity. Secondly, in faith. Be an example in your faith. Third, he said, be an example within your love. Second was within conduct. But the first thing that Paul charges Timothy with, there, and you can read it in 1 Timothy 4:12, the first thing was with his speech. He said, I want you to be an example in the words that flow from your mouth. These 5 things have become a filter for me over the past week. I obviously had heard the verse before, but I put it to memory this past week. And by putting it to memory, it's become this filter. I am analyzing those 5 things, and today it's very relevant because the first thing connects with the verse that we read today around our words. Are we an example right now to all the believers? If everyone in our church community We're speaking the words that you are. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? Are you being an example right now in speech? Today could be that day. Today, perhaps maybe you had a bad week last week. Well, today can be a new day. Today you can be an example in speech. You can be an example by the words that come from your mouth, that they would be words of healing. And I pray that you and I would ask for that we would say, God, would you use me as an agent of healing? And one of the ways that we do that, it's not only through our presence, but it's through the words that flow from our mouth. Let's be an example in speech. That's day 12. Tomorrow will be day 13. I pray that you guys have an awesome day today. I look forward to diving in to chapter 13 with you tomorrow. Take care.